Hey everyone, Dan Gunther here. Welcome to my in-depth, spoiler-filled review of Star Wars: The Last Jedi. As I mentioned in my spoiler-free review a few days ago, I really enjoyed The Last Jedi. I know online there have been a lot of criticisms of the film, and I mean there's some good points made by people on both sides of this argument, but I for one really enjoyed the film. Just want you to know that going into this. So while I do have some criticisms of the film, I'm not going to be tearing it apart because I actually quite enjoyed it. So the first of the criticisms I have is the pacing of the film. For definitely the first half of the film, the pacing is kind of all over the place. It doesn't seem to really know where it wants to go at times. There's various situations that happen where, the pacing just seems really off. So Finn and Rose are going off on this mission and the fleet is under attack by the First Order. There's some weird humor moments that seem really out of place, but at the same time, it just, kind of jumps back and forth between different scenes and seems to meander a little bit. But, this is a bit of a minor complaint. It was a little disjointed, but it didn't kill my enjoyment of the film for sure. The tone seemed a bit off at times. I mean, there's definitely jokey parts, and for the most part, the humor actually works. There's some great moments. My favorite, I think, would have to be when Rey is, told by Luke to close her eyes and reach out, and she, of course, thrusts her hand out. Luke rolls his eyes and starts tickling her fingers, and, "Oh, I feel the Force! I feel the Force!" and slaps her hand. Some really great humor like that. That's a lot of fun. Poe's kind of interplay with Hux at the very beginning of the film, I thought felt a little bit off, but as I got into it, I kind of bought into it and enjoyed that. And also, I have to say, Hux, at first, I found myself having a bit of a hard time getting into the film and remembering what Star Wars is really like. So Hux seemed over the top to me, just too over the top. But then I remembered, the generals and the people in the original Star Wars trilogy, good, our first catch of the day. They are very over the top.
You rebel scum.
In general. So I kind of took me a little while, but I bought into it and really got into the film at that point. Okay, two big criticisms I have with the film. First of all, and I know this is part of the plot and the way it's supposed to go, but Poe Dameron, this guy, why? Okay, he shows such a basic lack of military discipline, which, I mean, I know that's in keeping with his character, but he doesn't take his plan to Laura Dern's Admiral character at any point. And I mean, I don't necessarily think that she would have gone along with the plan. In fact, the movie says that she probably wouldn't have, but you still at least give the option and take the plan to the Admiral and trust that she also has a plan. Now, the film does a bit of a disservice by showing, her not sharing that plan at all and leading her people to think that she doesn't know what she's doing. But at the same time, there may be concerns that they're not aware of, keeping military secrecy. Maybe she fears there's a mole on board who's transmitting their plans to the First Order. You never know what's going on, and you kind of have to trust your leaders a little bit, or at least a little bit more than Poe does in this movie. It's really frustrating. I understand that he's on an arc, and by the end of the film he's in a very different place and that's all resolved, but at the same time I spent the first half of this movie just rolling my eyes and going, "Poe, what are you doing?" Anyway. Okay, my second big concern with this movie is something that's a little bit nerdy, has to do with physics in space. Now, I know science fiction movies don't tend to get physics right a lot of the time. There's sound in space, for example. I mean, there's no air in space to carry sound, so you wouldn't hear the TIE fighters going by, but that stuff doesn't bother me. That's not relevant to the plot. Another one, smoke in space. When fire missiles or ships exploding, there's no smoke in space. You wouldn't see that. But that's okay. That's not germane to the plot. It's not something that the plot's relying on. However, basic physics. So the threat to the fleet is that they need to maintain a distance from the First Order capital ships to prevent themselves from being destroyed. Now, as each ship runs out of fuel, it grinds to a halt and is destroyed.
That's not how the Force works.
Specifically, force in the way that Sir Isaac Newton might define it. In space, there's no friction due to air or any kind of medium. Space is a vacuum. There's no matter to push against. So fuel in space means acceleration. If you have fuel, you can continue to accelerate. When you run out of fuel, that means that you stop accelerating and you maintain the speed that you're currently at in the direction that you're going. You would not suddenly grind to a halt. Now, Star Wars isn't the only science fiction property to get this wrong. Even my beloved Star Trek has gotten this wrong from time to time. However, in this case, it was just so fundamental to the plot that it really bugged me because it's not a problem they should be having. Now, this part of the story just, I think, needed a little bit more work to kind of sit down and come up with a problem that the fleet would have in order to get away from the First Order ships that didn't involve this just really egregious getting physics wrong. Okay, here's where I'm going to start gushing about this film. I'm going to talk a lot about the things that I really liked in The Last Jedi. First of all, Carrie Fisher. It was really wonderful to see Carrie Fisher as General Leia Organa on the big screen again, especially, of course, following her untimely passing last year. Now, she was a guest at the 2016 Edmonton Comic and Entertainment Expo, which I attended, and I really regret not taking the time to meet her there. It's a missed opportunity that I will always regret, especially since she passed away so soon after that. Really a huge loss to the world, and seeing her on screen here in that role was really special. And the special credit at the end was a really nice touch, and I'm really glad they included that. She really is a wonderful presence in this film, and interestingly, with the revelations we get about Luke's character later in the film, it seems that her use of the Force early on in this film to save herself after being blown out into space shows that she was in fact strong with the Force, while Luke himself had turned his back on it, which kind of flips around a criticism that many people had after The Force Awakens, showing or not showing Leia using the Force. So it seems that she is strong with the Force, and Luke himself has turned his back on it, which I thought was an interesting flip of expectations. I want to talk a little bit about Yoda's appearance in this film. This was a character appearance that was really welcome. A lot of people think that it might just be along the lines of fan service. I disagree. It was really great to see the little green Jedi Master again. And I love that he was very close to his appearance in Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back, as opposed to how he appeared in the prequels, which of course makes sense. But, you know, he was goofier. But he was always kind of goofy in Return of the Jedi and Empire. And I love that we get a return of the goofy version of Yoda again. And he also gets some really great lines here. Him interacting with Luke Skywalker, it just brought back so many fun memories from my childhood of seeing, especially The Empire Strikes Back. So, you know, really props for that inclusion. I didn't see it coming, and I'm really glad it was there. It was a really sweet moment.
What do you see?
Light. Darkness. A balance.
This film introduces some gray area into the Star Wars universe. Star Wars has always, to me, been about good versus evil, a very black and white way of looking at the universe. Now, there are good guys, there are bad guys. Good guys can become bad guys, and bad guys can become good guys. But the line between them, the delineation between them, has always been very well defined. The Last Jedi introduces some ambiguity into that. Benicio del Toro's character, DJ, outlines this very well, talking about arms dealers who sell both to the First Order and to the Resistance. Good guys, bad guys, they're just made up words, as he says. And maybe he's very right about that. In Star Wars, we tend not to think about the scores of people that are killed when the rebellion scores a huge victory against the Empire, for example, destroying both Death Stars and the Superstar Destroyer and all that stuff, we don't think about all the lives of the stormtroopers and the Imperial officers. But both sides in these films do a lot of killing, and it's very interesting that The Last Jedi addresses this. Even Luke himself, who has been elevated to the status of a legend, has some gray. His actions that directly led to Kylo Ren's turn to the dark side, for example, are a very strong part in this film. Luke made a terrible mistake, and this film shows a lot of our heroes making very big mistakes. So, for example, I talked about Poe already and his sending Finn and Rose off on that mission, and Finn and Rose, their mission directly leads to the loss of many people in the Resistance. I mean, we expect that the valiant heroes will pull off the impossible mission at the last minute, and, you know, in the end, though, they lose big time. I'll have a link to a video by E.C. Henry that talks about these things a lot better than I do. It was a really great watch. You should give it a look for sure. The true area in which I think The Last Jedi excels is in challenging our expectations. I already mentioned the huge losses that the Resistance takes because of Poe, Finn's, and Tico's actions, but beyond that, there are so many times in this film that the plot turns left when I fully expect it to turn right. For 2 years after The Force Awakens was released, countless YouTube videos and articles speculated about Rey's origin. Who are her parents? Who could they possibly be? As well as, where does Supreme Leader Snoke come from? Who is this guy? What's his secret identity? And I love, in The Last Jedi, we learn that Rey's parents are nobody special. She's not a Skywalker or a Kenobi or even related to Palpatine, as some videos I saw speculated. She's just the daughter of junk traders from Jakku. And Snoke is killed by his apprentice with nary a clue given as to his true origins. I love that. Luke says it himself.
This is not going to go the way you think.
And really, that one line says it all. The Last Jedi is proving to be a very polarizing film in the Star Wars fan community. People on both sides make a lot of good points, as I mentioned before, and there are certainly things in this film that I found subpar or that I would have wanted to have seen play out differently. However, ultimately, I really enjoyed this installment of the Star Wars saga. It introduces more nuance into this universe than a simple good versus evil morality play. And that to me is very welcome, and it makes me very excited to see more avenues opened up to explore in future films. Luke's death, of course, is very sad, but ultimately it was a moment in the film that I feel that it earned very well. I found myself really interested in Kylo Ren's journey, which really surprised me because after The Force Awakens, I was not really interested in his character. I wasn't a big fan, but now I really want to see how things play out. The scene where he kills Snoke, for example, felt at the time unearned. I didn't buy his sudden turn to the light side. I didn't think the film had earned that moment. All was forgiven, however. Moments later, we learn he hasn't actually turned to the light side. He isn't redeemed. He wants power for himself and invites Rey to rule the galaxy at his side. Maybe I should have seen that coming, but I didn't, and props to the film for giving us something new. Finally, I want to close out on a memorial for a beloved Star Wars character who was lost in this film, one of my absolute favorites and the favorite of people very close to me. His death is very keenly felt, and he will be missed. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for more videos, mostly about Star Trek, but occasionally I will be making videos about other science fiction properties as well, such as Star Wars. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, the Force will be with you. Always.